Hey, thanks for watching. I started part 1 by saying that I'd watched a lot of videos of guys installing coilovers on their RSX, taking a few pulls and enjoying the ride. Well, guess what? This video is not going to go that way either. I drove my RSX around for over 3 years on Raceland Coilovers and Raceland top mounts before I ever got around to working on the other parts of the suspension to try to eliminate all the noises I was hearing. I'd replaced the lower ball joints before I ever got the coilovers installed properly. After I did get them installed properly, I spent a fair amount of time futzing around with the tie rod ends. Just recently, I replaced all the bushings on the lower control arms. While all that did help with the noises and some of the steering issues, I was still getting a fair amount of clunking and popping. Not all the time, just when I was doing things like parking or backing out of the garage. You know, the stuff you do all the time. It's embarrassing, and it's really freaking annoying. At this point, I am convinced that I have the coilovers installed properly, so the noise has to be coming from somewhere else, right? It has to be. Well, so begins part 2 of my Raceland Coilover Journey. Let me start with a more careful description of what I'm facing. Everything seems fine at speed. In fact, I think the car corners better than it ever did. It's really only at very low speeds that I'm having trouble. But listen to this. There's a hardware store here that's closed, so I'm going to pull in here. A little noise there. Let's see. Let's pull up here. I'll park here. Yeah, I still got something there. What the hell is that? Yeah, did you hear that? There it is again. I'm still getting it. What the hell is it? I thought sure that was going to be the tie rods. Yeah, there it is again. Pop. You can tell from what I said that at some point I was suspecting the tie rod ends. What I really want you to get from this video is an idea of the kinds of sounds I'm hearing and when I'm hearing them. Before I started to suspect the tie rod ends, I did some research on the internet. I found a lot of people saying that bad or worn sway bar end links could cause these kinds of noises. The descriptions I was coming across on the internet didn't seem to be a perfect fit. Still, it seemed worth investigating. Well, this would be a real short video if that turned out to be the problem. After replacing the sway bar end links, everything from the outer tie rod ends out, except for the tires, was relatively new. So instead of just continuing to replace things, I thought I'd probably better try to find some real evidence. So I have this fiber optic camera that I can connect to my phone. I actually bought this to try to determine if there were rats living under my shed. It worked pretty good for that. But I decided, you know, maybe I can use this to try to figure out what's going on in the wheel wells of my car. For my first attempt to use the camera, I attached it to this rigid brake line, and from there I ran it up into the engine compartment and out of the engine compartment through a piece of plastic tubing to protect it, and then out of the tubing and into the cabin of the car. So here's a sample of the video I was able to capture. You can certainly see the spring flexing, and if you look close, you can see the bearing of the upper mount rotating. But overall, it's pretty hard to see anything. And I didn't capture anything that seemed like it would be causing the noises I was hearing. Next, I wanted to get a look at the outer tie rod ends while the car was moving, so I fastened the camera to this subframe rod, which seemed to give the camera a pretty good view. Here you can see where the camera's mounted from inside the wheel well. So the video I captured this time was pretty fun. and I'm not sure how useful it ended up being. You can see where the tie rod end mounts to the coilover arm in the upper right hand corner of the video. And you can see that tie rod end move up and down as the car moves, in some cases more jarringly than others. And I convinced myself that when the tie rod end moved in a jarring fashion like that, it was happening at the same time as I was hearing the clunks and pops. Well, this got me thinking about why the outer tie rod ends might be causing me problems. And you remember how I said that I futzed around with the tie rod ends a lot? Well, let's talk about that some. These are the tie rod ends I had on the car. They're not actually made for the RSX. Here's one that was made for the RSX. You can see this shaft part is longer on this one. The reason I had these on the car is when I had these on the car, if I turned them onto the tie rod about 5 times, the wheels would be towed out significantly out of spec. To get it in spec, I had to screw them out less than 5 threads on the tie rods, and that made me pretty uncomfortable. I went looking to see if I could find a tie rod end that I could use that had a longer stem right there so I could get more threads onto the tie rod. So I found this cool page on the Moog website where instead of typing in the vehicle that you want to find a tie rod in for, you could actually type in the specifications. So I typed in the specs for the RSX, except for the length. Here I wanted something longer. This tie rod end came up. This is actually for a Hyundai Santa Fe, I believe. The conical part of this stem here is actually a tiny fraction smaller than what it is for the RSX. So I put them on and I ran them for years without any steering problems. But when I saw the tie rod ends bouncing when I'm hearing the noises in the videos, I decided it was time to go back to the RSX tie rod end. I would just run the car with the alignment out of spec, see if I could get rid of those noises. So that brings us back to here. What the hell is it? I thought sure that was going to be the tie rods. First test is always getting out of the garage. The left-hand park. Listen to that. That was on the passenger side. Oh, that was the driver's side. Yeah, definitely heard some shifting around there. Maybe it's just a matter of getting things tight enough. Don't hear anything I feel like I shouldn't hear. I think I figured it out. Well, shit. I thought I had this figured out. But after 5 or 6 times driving the car, it's gotten worse. I'm not really that optimistic, though. There's one pop. Passenger side. And there went one on the driver's side. No, I don't think we got it. Take, I don't know, 400. Yee. Big time spring bind right there. Hopefully that's settling. Pop, 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 pop. Can you hear that? I heard just there's another little pop right there. I've been watching a lot of videos. I watched one where the guy that was doing the install was tightening down his pinch pins, and he mentioned that the top pinch pin should be at 101 foot-pounds and the bottom one should be 116. And I'd been doing 101 foot-pounds on both for the last few times. And I thought, was that right? So I went and I looked in the factory service manual, and sure enough, it has the two separate torque specifications for those two pinch pins. And then I noticed that it actually says that the top pinch pin is a 14 and the bottom one is a 16. So they're supposed to be two different sizes. And I've just been torquing them, and I've been torquing them down wrong. Well, it didn't do it. Meaning that it didn't fix it. I definitely got the noises when I parked again. You don't know what the hell to do. So I have the new Monroe strut mounts installed in the car. And my first test drive seemed pretty good. Went, parked it, tested those slow turns, and I didn't have any noises, and I thought, hot damn. Next time I drove it, there was just a little bit of a shift noise as I backed out of the garage, and then everything was good. Then the last time I drove it, I backed out of the garage, I didn't have any noise, but then I drove to my destination and I parked, no noise. And then when I came out and backed out of the parking stall, I had a little bump, and then I had some spring clunk. So, heart sank. Hot. Well, this video, I'm going to turn on the AC, I guess. I got out of the garage without any noises, so that's good. Definitely haven't solved the problem. I had some minor clunking when I had to stop part way, and then when I got to where I was going, I parked, left the car sitting for, 5 or 10 minutes. Then when I came back out in the car to leave, I backed out of the parking place and had some significant clunking. I'm turning the wheel. It was in full lock to the left. Now I'm going to turn it full. I'm going to turn it back to the middle here. Okay. Now, if I get up in here on this spring, see that? I can make that spring move. Now, I don't know. Wait, let's try to pull it this way. Okay, so I'm going to pull it back towards me. Okay. Now let's come back. Towards the left. There it went. Ha! Caught it on video. So in that last video, I think I figured out where the clunking's coming from. You saw it in the video, but I have the spring out of my car, so I can show what I think the problem is. Okay, so here's the spring. Here is plastic insulator supplied by Raceland. And here is a top hat also supplied by Raceland. So this insulator fits over that top hat like that, and the top hat sits on top of the spring like that, and the top mount sits on top of the top hat. And you can see there's a fair amount of play there. So here's what I did. What if I could make one of these insulators where this surface here was thicker than when that was placed on here and then placed on the spring, it wouldn't move so much. So all of this stuff. Anyway, I ended up making those 7, and then actually one of those works reasonably well. I'm not sure which one it is, but after I got that one to work, I made some small adjustments, and then I made these two. And these two go on there very nicely. And then this will fit on the spring, and there's very little play. I didn't want it to get too tight. I mean, I feel like Raceland probably had a little bit of play in there on purpose. I'm hoping that this will solve the majority of the clunking problems, and at least for a short period of time. So we'll give it a try. I'll get them on the car and we'll see how it does. Well, I think this is kind of interesting. So I have here some genuine Honda parts ordered from a Honda dealer at their online site. Bearing rings for the upper mounts. That's the side that sits against the upper mount. That's the side that sits against the top hat. And they don't look at all like the ones I put in last. Here it is. Let's see. So there it is on the upper mount. There's the top hat. And there is the bearing ring that is stuck to the top hat because as soon as I applied any pressure at all the grease seeped out. And these were supposedly OEM originals, but I bought them from eBay, and the packaging certainly didn't look the same. Maybe they're just older, or maybe they're counterfeit. I don't know, but seeing how different these are, I'm thinking I'm going to do this next install using the ones I just got, see if they spring a grease leak like those things did. Biggest worry at this point is that those insulators aren't tough enough and they'll crack under the forces, but we'll see what happens. Okay, well, I took it to the grocery store and I parked, and it was perfect when I parked. No abnormal sounds. It sounded great. I sat for a couple seconds and I backed out. I heard a little bit of noise, just a tiny bit. So maybe I'm still gonna have issues. Been doing a bunch of testing today. I had the wheel off. I put the weight of the car on the lower ball joint here, compressed the spring, turned the wheel back and forth and stuff. Couldn't decide if I was feeling anything important or hearing anything important. I'd hear the spring clench up a little bit and stuff, but never really got any good clunks or pings out of it. Yeah, so then I took the weight of the car off and then turned the wheel and stuff and managed to make a small clunk. Analyzed the video and I could tell that the clunk was coming from where the top hat is sitting on the bearing ring. You see I got this little bit of play here. Maybe you can see that, maybe you can't. You can hear it. After I released the weight of the car, then right after I turned the wheel, the whole assembly shifted against that bearing ring. That little bit of play right there. And just made a little clunk. I could hear it from the driver's side of the car. You can hear it in the video. And even though it only moved probably 0.5 millimeter or something like that. Well, I really have almost no confidence that this is going to fix anything. Okay, well that's probably better than anything I've had ever. Backed out of the garage, into the street, straightened out, took off. Not a damn noise. Well, holy bags of crap. Haven't had a noise since I left the house. It's got gas. Okay, here we go. Fingers crossed. Not a peep. That was beautiful. All right, here we go. Backing out. Don't run into any cars or people. And we may be golden. Not a damn sound. Holy crap. Holy crap. Holy crap. I am beyond frustrated. I guess I've eliminated preload causing issues. At this point, I am all but convinced that there is something wrong with my coilovers. Maybe they're bent. Maybe the shaft inside has got bent somehow. There's also the possibility that everybody who puts in coilovers just accepts the noise they make. At least anybody who installs coilovers using the stock top mounts. So I think what I'm going to do is, well, first off, I'm going to take them out and I'm going to examine them very closely. I'm going to see if I can tell if there might be a bend or something like that that's affecting them. And then, regardless of what I find, I'm going to try to put a little grease on the underside of the top mount. And I'm checking out how square this shaft is relative to this plane, and it looks like it could be bent. So I'm gonna take some photos, stills of what I'm seeing, that I can send to Raceland and see what they think. Take a look at this. Put my straight edge on it. I mean, it is pretty much perfect. Turn it this way. Again, pretty much perfect. I did get an email back from Raceland yesterday, and they felt like that was within reasonable tolerances. So there's nothing to indicate to me that I could get a replacement Raceland coilover and have it do anything different than what these are doing. So I'm going to put this back together. I'm going to grease up the top mount just like I did on the passenger side, and we'll put it back in the car and we'll see if the grease helps with any of the noises. So the grease really didn't help. I can't imagine at this point you're any more surprised than I am. But you may be surprised to hear that I've decided to give up trying to eliminate the noises. Raceland's latest position is essentially that it's either me or there's something wrong with my car. I'm disinclined to agree, but if it is me, it's probably just because the noises bother me more than they do other people. I suspect other people have these problems, they just don't care about it as much. They're happy with the lowered look and the improved handling, so they figure it's a small price to pay. So I think in the end, the best setup I found was using the 02 to 04 top mounts with real OEM bearing rings and my homemade insulator instead of the Raceland insulator. While it wasn't noise free, it at least made the noises fairly minimal and a little bit easier to ignore. I got pretty hung up with the top nut not being centered in the top mount. That's because when I first was learning how to install the coilovers, at some point the top nut not being centered in the top mount was an indicator that I had done something really wrong. In the end, I think it's pretty normal for that top nut to move around some. This clip, which I made with my fiber optic camera, shows just how much that top nut can move around while you're driving the car. This rubber material in here is a little stiffer in the Moog top mounts and the Monroe top mounts that I have than it is in the Raceland top mounts. I think the stiffer material is better because it wears better, but it isn't meant to keep that top nut from moving around. It's actually there to allow this top mount to act a little bit like a ball joint. This clip illustrates how the coilover doesn't really rotate around a fixed axis. The bottom of the coilover moves along an arc, and that requires that the angle at which the piston shaft passes through the top mount also change. Not only is the rubber material necessary for this, but it must also be possible for the top hat and bearing ring to move around a bit. The smooth, rounded surfaces of the underside of this top mount, it's meant to allow this bearing ring to move around a little bit on there as that piston shaft shifts from side to side. I think these metal bearing rings are meant to be able to move around inside this cup a little bit as well. You can see that the corner inside this cup is rounded and this surface here is rounded, which should allow that bearing ring to pop in and out a little bit. But I think that's what causes this style of mount to rattle. Anyway, I think this top mount assembly allows for a little bit more piston movement than does this top mount assembly. But I think the increased spring rate and the harder damping of the Raceland coilovers compared to a stock strut can also restrict the movement a bit. So even if your bearings are working perfectly, allowing the spring to rotate freely around the axis of the piston, you can still get some spring binding. When you turn the wheel of the car, changing the angle of the coilover axis, the spring can get stuck at a different angle than the top hat, or the top hat can get stuck at a different angle than the bearing ring, or the bearing ring can get stuck at a different angle than the top mount, until enough shear force develops and forces the parts to line up, again resulting in one part wrapping against another. My homemade insulator minimized this interaction between the spring and the top hat, and I was hoping the grease would prevent the binding between the bearing ring and the top mount. And maybe the grease would have helped had I made it a thicker layer, maybe a different grease. At any rate, slopping a bunch of grease on there was just going to create a mess, which I wasn't really excited about. So at this point, I don't really think I'm going to find a solution with these coilovers that's going to satisfy me. I think if you're going to use these top mounts, which have to act a little bit like a ball joint, then you can't really have the ride height and the preload be coupled together. I originally bought these Raceland coilovers because they were inexpensive and they seemed pretty simple. Well, I still think they were and are a great value. I've run them in my car for over 5 years and I really enjoyed the look and the way the car handles. But as we've seen, just because a coilover only has one adjustment, it's not going to make things simpler. There's one last thing I want to clear up. I do not recommend using an impact wrench to tighten down that top nut. Even though that's what Raceland told me they do, I don't think it's necessary. Just get yourself some tools that are about 12 inches long, and that's going to give you enough leverage to get that top nut tight enough to do the job. I haven't caught it on video, but the last couple of times I drove the car, the passenger side made some really awful banging sounds. And my suspicion is that all the times that I reinstalled the coilovers and tightened that top nut down with the impact wrench, at some point that damaged something in that coilover, and that's why I'm getting those loud noises. I don't know that, that's just speculation, but I guess consider yourself warned. So that's it. This is the end of my Raceland Coilover Journey. I hope it helps you out. Once again, thanks for watching.